Hello. Hello. Hopefully today we're going to have a nice smooth run with things technically. Not like last week where YouTube went a bit crazy on us at the sort of when I got to the question time. And so good to be back. Good to have you with me. Thank you for joining me again this weekend. I'm always very pleased to be back with you for these chats and to talk about our favorite topic of languages. Geruch, Gismoiruch, Constante. So today I picked a topic that actually has come up in a number of comments that I've seen about language learning and about whether is knowing English enough. And I wanted to sort of put that out there about, is English enough? And for me, it's a question that I think I wanted to leave as open as possible. So I think the first thing I want to do is just acknowledge that a number of you wrote and said, what do you mean by is English enough? What does that mean? And my reply to that was, whatever you want it to mean. And so I left it deliberately up to interpretation. And the reason I did that is because I find that when questions are more open and don't suppose what the person asking them wants them to say, or doesn't sort of second guess the responses, I find that I get a lot more diversity of thought. And I actually really like diversity of thought. It's something I really greatly value in our language learning community and just generally in the world. I think it's extremely important to hear from people who have different experiences, different lived experiences, and different because we all come in different packages, right? We all come in different bodies, we all come in different forms, we all come with different beliefs and different experiences. And really what they do is when we see something, whether it's a question, whether it's anything really that we come across in life, we react to it based in quite a large detail on our lived experiences and who we are and where we're from and what we do and what we've reacted to before and how people have reacted to us before. And so I much prefer these kinds of open style questions for that reason, because I think it gives us the opportunity to really hear and see and experience and learn from a wide variety of backgrounds and points of view, and it doesn't sort of suppose an answer. So that's why I do this. And it's something that I've learned over the years of just, I like to listen to what people have to say. And I like to try and understand as best I can from without, as far as I can, putting my own experiences on top of that and layering things before I've had the experience of unpacking what somebody else has to say about their experiences. So that's kind of where I come from with this type of angle. And so yeah, I've really enjoyed reading the answers, the sort of thoughts that people have had on this, and I've really enjoyed seeing them. So thank you so much for submitting answers. And what I wanted to do in the first instance is to read out some of the responses to you, and I'll summarize some of them if they're similar, or if if that's easier. But I'll read them out first, and then I want to talk about what my thoughts are, and then I will come to questions at the end, and I'll look through Instagram and on YouTube and look at the questions on both of those platforms. So that's how it's going to work. So here we go. So on Instagram, I got a few answers, and the questions about wishing for English accents and dialects to develop more so that actually they would become separate languages. Now, as far as that goes, there's a very good chance that that can happen in many places, and that happens and has happened over centuries. And so languages have developed from sort of parent language We saw it with Latin, obviously, and developed into other languages, the Latin language family that we have today, Romance languages. And so, yeah, why not? Why couldn't more things come from English? I mean, we've already got, things that are referred to as patois or Creolized languages that richly are languages, but from sometimes with English influence, sometimes with other local influence. So, yeah, why not? That would be quite cool. Some people saying directly English isn't enough, and somebody here writing from Azerbaijan saying that they're learning Italian because English isn't enough for them. And have this in Daytona. Apparently, it's helpful to have at least one or two other languages: Spanish, Turkish, Russian, French, etc. Thank you, Jeff. It's interesting to hear from different parts of the world what's seen as useful. Of course, I think a lot of this will depend where we are in the world, right, as well. So, is English necessary? Is a question back to me from Rob from Brazil. So, yeah, that's a different question, isn't it? Is English necessary? So maybe we need to go back to that as well. I have some people commenting that English is probably enough to foster international communication, and therefore, in that sense, is enough. But it's not always enough to reach people's hearts. Well, I know that there is another quote that I've got from the Nelson Mandela quote came up on Twitter with a similar idea, and I remember that coming up to reach people's hearts, right? You speak their language. I'm obsessed with and love languages, but for most fields, I see English as the key language. That's an interesting thing to say. Even in spite of your love for language, you're saying that you recognize English as a key language. And Ron says, I would say no, but then again, for some people, it might depend where they are. Good to balance. I like that. I like the balancing there, Ron. And then Eduardo says, culture and language diversity. So I'm guessing that's a no there, Eduardo. Mitchell wrote from Canada saying that, in Toronto, actually, some of the monolingual Anglophones who swear that English is enough, but there are too many ways to recount in which their experience and ways of framing things are limited by that. So that he feels that you can limit your experiences by saying that it is enough and just not exploring anything else. Of course, you don't know what you don't know. Okay, that's true. That's very true, Mitchell. I agree. You don't know what you don't know. And on the other side of the monolingual neighbors and relatives is I have been touched in my life by the amount of amazing people. Some of my dearest friends, mostly in Japan and other places as well, China, Taiwan, now Thailand, who lead such rich, meaningful lives without knowing English. Absolutely. I know people like that too, Mitchell. I think that's it's a very good observation. Learn Greek on Twitter says, since the question is open to interpretation, I'll say it's enough. More is great to have, but not necessary. Zero to Hero in Canada says Chinese is enough. Nice counter. I like it. Okay. And then Luca says, interpreting the question as, is English as a language enough for people to learn? Then yes, I agree. I think it's unreasonable to ask people to learn lots of languages, especially if they don't need more languages in their daily life. Okay. It's interesting now to add that level onto it. I agree that sometimes we do need to deepen things. Sometimes when we to take a stance, right? Sarah says, of course, not enough for us. Everyone following you is already a language learner, so the results might be a little bit biased. I agree. I can see how they could be. Although I have got quite a nice balance, more than I expected. I thought everyone would say, no, it's not enough. I've got to have lots of lots of other languages. But people have been quite reasonable, I think. So Norman actually went on to ask about the dialects too of English, whether an English dialect would be enough. Too many variables to answer the question, yes or no. So many twists and turns can happen in one life, not to mention the changes that happen to the language. Fair enough. Fair enough. Paul said, in Europe, English is enough. And Tom said, sadly, yes, he thought it was enough too. Philippe says, it's not enough when living in Japan, I expect. That's also fair enough as well. Sophie Lerty says that felt that the quote for Nelson Mandela that Fat Thor came out with, if you talk to a man in his language, he understands and it goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, then that goes to his heart, from Nelson Mandela. An emotional connection is needed sometimes. It cannot be all business and politics. And Sophie Lert says, it's a cute quote, but it only applies if you know the language really, really well. I much prefer people speak to me in English than my native language. If they don't know it properly, okay. If they don't, communication is just superficial, and it's definitely head, not heart. Interesting retort actually for that quote. I find that quite interesting. Be interested to know if any of you agree with that. If you do have experience of people trying to speak your language, but it doesn't actually get to your heart, it gets to your head, and you feel you need to switch to English to make yourself understood, and you feel more comfortable that way. It's an interesting dynamic. And we get all this enrichment from the study. We don't need to be fluent. This year's Eurovision had so much fun singing songs, sometimes very badly in languages I hardly know. That's a nice thing. I like that as well. I like that idea that you can just enjoy language for the sake of enjoying a language. Timothy, our dear friend Timothy says, depends on how you view language. If you reduce it to transmitting information, understanding transmitted information, English might be enough to get and transmit enough information. But enough is the enemy of better. If you want better, warmer relationships, English isn't enough. It's very nice. I like that. You got away with words there, Timothy. Absolutely. Carla says, basta solo en contados casos. Es mejor hablar español. El neerlandés, el noruego, el francés, y el japonés también ayudan. So yeah, getting a mixture of languages there could also help out. Norman also added that he believes that there are so many advantages to learning more languages or even dialects, and it would be missing an opportunity sticking only to English or only one dialect of it. And the vote that I asked people to take part in, so the results on Twitter were actually 89% of you thought that English was not enough, and 11% said yes, it was enough. And there were 153 votes cast, and I just stopped that just before this. So that's a fair amount of people to vote on this, and I'm not surprised by the vote results, because we are a language learning community. So of course we want to think that what we're doing is good, and as most of us on this planet, we like to rationalize our behaviors and what happens in our lives and things. So it's quite natural for us to say, yeah, what we're doing is right. So taking all that on board, before I go on, please do remember to hit like, please remember to follow, and you're very, very welcome to join me on my website and on my other channels as well, of course. I'm very, very happy to hear from you if you've got particular questions or needs with your own language learning. So please reach out. You've got all the links on my website and also in the description of the video on YouTube. So feel free to check those out. And you can even, if you feel like it, treat me to a coffee now. I've set up one of those coffee things. So you can treat me to a coffee if you like what I do, and feel free to do that. And yes, so anyway, onwards and upwards with the discussion about languages, and particularly English, and whether or not it's enough. Now, I want to tell you a story of literally just now before I came online to talk to you today. I went out with my daughter and my mother-in-law, and They went off shopping and I sat and had a coffee. And I have been living in the Balkans. I guess I've spent probably the best part of 15 years in the Balkans of my life, which is a sizable amount of time of my life in the Balkans. So I know a number of Balkan languages, definitely well enough to live my life through them. And I was sitting there, and I don't look like I'm from the Balkans, so I'm always going to stand out as somebody who looks foreign in this part of the world, and I accept it, I understand it, and that's fine. Now, I always like to see how people approach me and talk to me, because I find it interesting to see the look of confusion on their face if I do speak to them in the local language. And if they know me, they speak to me usually in Macedonian or Albanian or Turkish. And depending on where I'm sitting for coffee or where I'm going out around town, they usually know I speak their language if I've been there before. And a great number of people do know that I speak the local language or languages. So they will address me in those languages. That said, today I had people approach me, looked at me, and spoke to me immediately in English. Now, in the, I guess, 18 years that I've been coming to the Balkans, since when I first came to the Balkans, I guess it's been around 18 years. And at that time, people's levels of English really the level wasn't that high. So actually, I had to piece together some form of a language that would be understandable and comprehensible. And because I'd been living in Czech Republic, the language didn't seem so alien to me. And as I do enjoy languages, I kind of read through travel guides and things and made myself understood to a number of people around town the first time I came. Nowadays, it's a bit different, particularly with a lot of the younger people. They are all looking at social media, which wasn't really a thing back then. They watch a lot more English TV than before. And so the level of English has really improved, and people do tend to speak it quite well, and they actually really enjoy speaking English. It's almost a status symbol to say you speak English. It's kind of, look at me, I've learned English, I'm educated, and so it's almost a badge of honor to wear for people to speak English. So they enjoy the opportunity to speak English in this part of the world. I, however, much prefer to speak the local languages. So when I was approached today by two people, one person who wanted to take a chair from the table, and the person who was serving me for coffee, both opened in English. And I looked at them and I said, in Macedonian, do you speak Macedonian? And they both looked at me and said, yes. And I said, okay, what is it you'd like? And then the one person wanted the chair, and I said, that's fine, take it. And the other person said, what would you like to drink? And I ordered my drink. Actually, she said, I think she was trying to be clever. So she said, I said, I can speak to you in Macedonian, Albanian, or Turkish. Which one would you like? Because I couldn't tell her ethnicity. I didn't know which language she spoke, so I offered all three. And she said Albanian at first, but she wasn't an Albanian speaker, so she didn't quite follow everything I said. I think she was trying to be interesting to test if I could speak. But when I ordered my drink in Albanian, she looked very confused, and I said, should we just speak Macedonian instead? And she agreed, and we spoke Macedonian. But what happened there is I wanted to speak the local languages. I didn't, I like speaking languages. I enjoy doing it, but I could have just spoken English. So in that situation, English would have been enough. And in fact, in traveling in some parts of the world, people really enjoy practicing their English. They don't always get people who grew up speaking English around them to practice it with somebody who's a very competent speaker of the language, who has been speaking it all their lives. And so they enjoy that opportunity to speak it, particularly to a visible foreigner. It looks good for them around their friends or their work colleagues that they're doing this. It makes them feel better. And in a way, sometimes I do feel a little bad when I don't just speak English. But my reason for not doing that is very simple. I need to fit in here. This is my new tribe. This is my new community, and I can't expect to speak what is, in all intents and purposes, a foreign language on this in this part of the world. And it would be very odd for me to come and live in a different part of the world and speak my own language. So and also I speak these languages on a daily basis. So ordering a coffee isn't really going to help them to practice particularly, because supposedly their English will be a lot better than just ordering coffee. And for me, it's kind of less pleasurable to go out and feel like a foreigner in what is my home. So for me, English isn't enough in that I would feel very rude. I would feel like I was being disrespectful to the countries where I've been living over the years, and I would also feel like I wasn't making an effort to fit in as much as I possibly can. So for me, English isn't enough for that reason. But I agree with a lot of what people have said, that for many things around the world, and the Balkans isn't an exception in this. There are many other parts of the world where English is not just something that people can speak, but they also want to speak it. And I agree that you can get by speaking English quite adequately in many parts of the world. There definitely are countries still where you can't. And so for those countries, English wouldn't be enough. And if you were just to speak English in those countries, you would have a very close circle of friends or contacts that you could use. It means that you would live your experiences through translation. You wouldn't be able to interact with a lot of the people that you come across on a personal level, to be able to hear their stories, to be able to enrich your own experience of the world by talking to them and engaging them. Now, the quote from Nelson Mandela, I kind of understand the reply to that of, if you don't speak the language very well, then it's possibly easier and better to speak English. Now, what if that isn't actually an option to speak English? So if you just speak a little bit of the language and you can interact, and I've had experiences like that where I speak a language to a lower level. I don't feel overly confident in those languages. I have had a very positive experience of using them. Indonesian is one, for example, where I spent a month in Indonesia and I spoke the language to local people, and I definitely got a lot more out of my experience in Indonesia by speaking Indonesian, even the limited amount that I speak, than I did speaking just English or using my hands. So that's absolutely true. And Svetlana, it's good that you mentioned the Netherlands, because I did want to mention that as well. If I was to live and work in the Netherlands, I would learn the language. I find materials, and if I couldn't get to the physical classes, I would find a teacher online. And these days, it would be it would be a lot easier. Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting you mentioned the Netherlands, because I lived in the Netherlands and I was there for 2 years. And when I went there, I had already studied some Dutch because I lived near the Dutch border in Germany, and I was absolutely set on really improving my Dutch and getting it to a very high level when I moved there, and to use it even for my work. I wasn't originally brought in to use Dutch. I was brought in to use German, actually, as my main language. But what I did was I used my other languages too, but maybe within 6 months, I started using my Dutch as well for work in the Netherlands, and I was using it with my colleagues, my Dutch colleagues. Now, a place like the Netherlands, very often, people will automatically switch to English if they hear you get stuck on a word, or if they hear an accent, or if they think that they want to help you out. And they're often not doing it for a bad reason. It's more they feel that they're trying to help, because they do have quite a high level of English, generally speaking. Now, when I was there, I used to say to them, look, I'm living in your country. I really need to speak your language well because I get all of my letters and all of my business is conducted through Dutch. The bank doesn't write to you in English. The electricity companies and things don't write to you in English necessarily. And in fact, there would be legal implications, I guess, if they got things wrong in the letters because they're using a language that's not an official language of the country. So I used to point this out to Dutch people when I was living there, and I used to ask them to kindly help me improve so that I could fit in more to society. And they mostly did. I mean, I don't think I ever had the experience of somebody saying, no, I won't, that's unreasonable. You're in my country, you'll speak your language, not mine. That would have been a really crazy thing to say. And no one, thankfully, said that to me. The really, yeah, the really weird thing was in the Netherlands at the time I was living there was that there were many foreigners there who had this experience that they couldn't really learn the language. And some of them didn't want to because they didn't have the motivation because they couldn't really practice it with anyone. Now, the issue was because they kept getting their letters in Dutch from all of these organizations and businesses, is that they bring them to work. And very often I would be one of the ones that would have to help them translate so that they knew what was going on, because otherwise they couldn't understand what was written. We didn't have Google Translate back then. We didn't have all these things to help us understand. We just had to take them to other people. So, having to read private letters and stuff. So in that case, Dutch definitely was useful. I also found in the Netherlands that when it got to very technical things, quite complicated things, Dutch people didn't have the level of English required to be able to do what was necessary. So when I had to have repairs done in my house, I had to learn certain words that, I had an issue with my skirting board, which many of you may or may not know. In America, it's called a baseboard, and in Dutch, it's called the blind. It's a blind, and people don't necessarily know words like that in English in the Netherlands. When I had went to the hospital, I did everything in Dutch again because the doctor wasn't as confident in English with some of the more technical things. So it was quite an interesting experience to sort of learn the different words for very specific parts of the body in Dutch. But it was also extremely useful and extremely necessary because otherwise I'd have to find someone to go with me. And you do get this still in the Balkans too, where some of the older doctors particularly won't speak English necessarily very well. So I've been with other foreign friends to the doctors and translated for them. And yeah, I mean, if you're close, it can work, but not everybody wants to do that all the time. So sometimes if you're living in a country particularly, speaking just English isn't necessarily the best thing. The other thing where I think just speaking English isn't great is if there's a security issue, if there's something happening and you're not aware of what's going on around you. So not being aware of things actually has security implications. You can be in danger and you won't know because you don't know what people are saying. And they may not have the words if they're in a panic to be able to explain it to you. They may just be running and you're running too, you don't know why. This happens from time to time. And okay, fortunately, hopefully not that often, but it's something that can occur. Also, if there are things going on around you, could be pickpockets, it could be things going around you that you're not aware of what's happening. And if you don't pick up on these subtle signs and the things that people are saying around you, this was an issue, for example, in Czech Republic, in Prague, when I lived there. There were pickpockets around, and you'd hear people saying, "Be careful! I've just seen somebody being robbed." And of course, if you didn't speak Czech, you didn't understand, so you were not aware, you weren't as conscious, and so they would target tourists, foreigners who didn't speak Czech, more so than they would locals because they were blissfully unaware, speaking away in English. So there are definitely reasons for doing that. Local, really having a local experience, making proper friends, or if you marry into a society or a culture, being able to speak to all of the different sides of the families. Definitely, if you've got emergencies or if you're dealing with administrative or legal things that you have to deal with in a country, it can be a big help to speak the language. And also, if you have security things or things going on around you to understand what's going on. There is one other thing that I think is really important as well. I'm trying to think if there is another one, but I think there's at least one that I can mention, and that is sometimes when people in another country from another culture do things or act a certain way or react in a strong way to something, it's because of certain things in the language that you only understand about the culture through the language, because the language is a vehicle for the culture. And so when they react to it in translation in English, it can seem silly. It can seem sometimes foreigners will judge a culture and judge it as stupid or nonsensical or even backward, unfortunately, because they see it as, oh, why are they doing this or why are they acting that way? But because they don't understand the language and they don't understand the nuances within the culture that are transmitted through the language, they don't get it. And they can't discuss it in the same way through the lens of English. Because if you're a monolingual English speaker, you can only really see the world through that monolingual English lens. It's very difficult to get the nuances sometimes without knowing the language, because you can have it explained to you and you can get it to a degree, I believe, and you can read about things. I mean, there are very educated people who are monolinguals and very sensitive culturally and pick up a lot of these nuances. But there are definitely things within language that when you speak the language, a lot more of that richness, of that depth appears and comes through. And so that would be my final reason why English is not enough. There is one other thing. So when we speak another language, generally, it doesn't have to be any language in particular. It helps us to understand better how our own language works, because we can then make a comparison, a linguistic comparison through the grammar and the vocabulary to see how we use language differently. And so that can be another reason why it's very beneficial to understand and speak another language. If we've done that, we can understand better as well how people learn English. So we know the process they go through, we know the struggles they go through, we understand what might be difficult, what might be easy for them to understand, so that we can adjust our levels as well. So it can make us more open-minded and more understanding to people who make the effort to learn English. It can help us to understand our own language better as English speakers or speakers of another language. If we can, I mean, this conversation doesn't just hold true for English, it holds true for any language. I mean, I'm using English because it's the first language I learned, but it could hold true for any language, and absolutely you gain this linguistic background and knowledge through speaking another language that you cannot necessarily get just by studying one and just learning your own first language, particularly English. Now, the one other thing that I would say about English in particular, and this will be different for different languages, is that a knowledge of German and French in particular really help you to get behind and understand and get under the skin of grammar and also vocabulary. So German grammar really helps you to understand some of the things that people get wrong a lot in English with I and me, for example, because if you speak German, you understand why I and me is, when they're used, why they're used in that way. And that's not necessarily something you get just as a monolingual English speaker. And in fact, I see many educated English speakers get that sort of stuff wrong in work emails, for example. And that's quite a common thing. It's there's nothing to make fun of. But at the same time, having an understanding of German helps you to understand the background as to why language works and why the English language particularly works in a certain way. The French language really helps to get under the skin of particularly high-level English vocabulary, because it can be a really great shortcut to English literature, to understanding why we use certain nuanced vocabulary, why certain words have developed. It helps with etymology, understanding where words have come from, understanding the meaning behind them. Extra languages like Greek really help you to understand etymology a lot better as well. For all Indo-European languages, there's a lot of Greek influence in many Indo-European languages that we can, if you go back to the Greek, you really start to understand a lot more about the etymology and where things have come from, why we say certain things. And this would be true for different languages with other different languages. So, for example, knowledge of Sanskrit for Thai speakers, knowledge of, I don't know, knowledge of Chinese and the Hanzi, if you're a speaker of Korean or Japanese, because you can make connections to some of the words that have come into the language. It flows in many different ways. Knowledge of Arabic, for example, from many cultures, and Turkish here in the Balkans, super useful, because it helps you understand a lot of the origins of many words, and helps you make links across the globe as well. And I hope that I've covered all of the points that I should cover. If I haven't, then I'll definitely come back and see if I can fill in any gaps. But I really hope that my discussion of what I see as why English is not necessarily enough helps. I'm definitely biased in that I am in the language learning community, so I accept my bias and acknowledge it. I also accept that there are many people out there in many parts of the world who learn no other languages and have a perfectly fine life, whether that's in English-speaking countries or in other language countries, and they're very successful, they do very well, and that I absolutely acknowledge, and I think that it's a personal choice. So when I say, is it enough? For me, no. I definitely encourage more people to learn, but I do also recognize that it doesn't even need to be English. It can be any language or any dialect of a language. If you're doing what you're doing and you're having a happy life and enjoying it, who am I to tell you what to do? You do you. So I'm going to try and get back now through the questions. I appreciate I spoke for quite a long time this time, and I want to try and get through as many as I can. I'll do my best. Okay. Er eens genoeg. Verspurningen. Ja, verspurningen. Ja, verspurningen. Too much shared world media in the world for actual diversification, like Latin developed into the remote language. Yeah, possibly. There's a lot of shared media, although you do see, you get pockets, right, of people learning in different ways, and I don't know I don't know how it will develop in the future. I think that's going back to the English. I don't know how it will go. We'll see. Magat, yeah, thank you. Wow, I'm glad you're. It's good to see you. What are your favorite invented languages? Do you know? I actually quite like Esperanto. I like Esperanto. I also like Interlingua. I think those two languages I enjoy. I follow somebody who creates content in Interlingua, and I really enjoy listening to him. But I enjoy also practicing Esperanto when I get the chance. I don't get to use it very often though. Derive Gardunya. Ah, Jizmorich. Ah, okay. Let me see. The question should ask what exactly English is enough to do. It's enough to get by on holiday and in a lot of places, not enough to navigate another culture. I agree. People think speaking English in a place like the Netherlands is enough, but you're living superficially when you do that. I agree. Absolutely. I couldn't have lived in the Netherlands without Dutch. I'd have found it very strange. But I mean, I also am probably not a very good example of a typical person moving to the country, right? If I was to live in the Netherlands, yes, I saw that one before, and I've read that one out because it came up. Okay. Is there a simple way to say hello in Albanian? Përshëndetje is a mouthful. So it depends which Albanian you speak. So Mirdita is the kind of like good day is a common one. Përshëndetje is like health, literally. But I believe it's Kosovo. Here they don't say it very much, but you can use tung, which is short for tung yetjeta, which is something that I sometimes say to little kids. I go, tung. And people look at me like, what are you talking about? But it's not used that often in all Albanian speaking circles. But Tungya Chepa Tung is the shortest one I can think of right now. What people tend to say is Charbonne here, right? It means like, how's it going? Yeah, Charbonne. If I was to call a water company, there would be no guarantees the operator would speak English, or they would probably not be ready or be scared. Yeah, the last minute. Yeah, absolutely, Svetlana. It's easy. The Dutch are hopeless at any language other than English, and even that's superficial for many. So you don't say you speak. So just say you speak French or Russian. Interesting there. Interesting comment. I went to the doctors in Russia and my Russian is not so good. I just took the documents and some words in Russian and they were very good. Then I went to the pharmacy and got what I needed. Fantastic. Sadlan, let's see. When I lived in Uganda, I came across people in services that didn't speak any English. I believe it or not while everyone in my village spoke very good English. Okay, wow. Okay. Just stopped by to say hello. Well, hello. Hope you're having a good day. Indeed. Thank you very much. My Japanese studies are calling me. Enjoy your Japanese studies. Okay. YouTube is hard to step away from. Click, click, click. That's okay. Well, good luck with Japanese study. Thanks for stopping by. I have an example of hola, hola, hola. I have an example of nuanced translations. The Korean translated the word crazy as almost a swear word. So I've heard many Koreans react negatively to offhand uses of the word crazy in English. Yeah, Ewan, absolutely. I can really, really believe that. People have they have their own sort of opinions of certain translations of words, particularly, words that mean something slightly different to them or a lot stronger in their language. They don't like to use, or they react badly to it, and we don't get it because we're not aware. People think speaking English in a place like the Netherlands is enough, but you're living sufficiently. Yeah, you have follow the gelijk. Yeah, it's hard to switch to Dutch after you read that word. I was like reading it thinking, was that in English again? Or I was going crazy. Okay. I was like, I'm half Portuguese, half Angolan. Oh, okay. Angolan. Italian, German, okay, let me see. Well said, Richard. Thank you very much, agent name. Which second language super easy after having learned English? The English after English depends on what your life situation is. I mean, the closest language to English is Scots. And then after Scots, I would probably say the easiest language for an English speaker to learn who's monolingual would be probably, in terms of just like picking up vocabulary and the grammar, would probably be Afrikaans, because it doesn't have gender. It's the verb conjugations are simple, but in terms of actually using it and speaking it in materials, that would be quite a challenge. It would depend. It's what your motivation is, I think. How did you learn Albanian, and any materials you suggest? So I picked up Albanian really in Skopje, and I used a number of different materials for a while. I'll just have a look and see if I can get them down. 1 second. Let me see if I've got them here. I may not have them. Oh no, I have. No. I may not have them, unfortunately. But the book is actually it's written in Macedonian, so it's not something I would necessarily recommend for everyone unless you speak Macedonian already. This is one of the books that I have. This is used at the university. This is used for the first year students at university in Skopje. And the other one, which I thought I had someone that I have close by, but I clearly don't. Is I can't remember the title now. Something about Ujima, but I can't remember the title off the top of my head. It's such a long time ago. So I started with books like this when I first arrived, and I learned through Macedonian, and then I watched TV. I used to practice it with people. I speak it with people here. So I mean, there are certain people I only speak to in Albanian, and my Albanian's not great. I mean, it's not amazing. Definitely easier for me to speak Macedonian for sure. There's no doubt. There's no contest. But Albanian speakers here tend to prefer to speak to me in Albanian, even if my Albanian's not as good as my Macedonian. So yeah, I do that. The weird thing is when I go to Albania, because they love to practice their English and speak English, they will often want to speak to me in English, which is really weird because that never happens in Skopje. People, if they're Albanian speakers, they would much prefer to speak to me in Albanian, generally speaking. So yeah, I started with that kind of stuff, but it's local materials. I did have the colloquial book, but I didn't like it. It was an old edition. There's a new edition now that's a lot better. I've seen that since. It's a lot better, but the old edition wasn't great. And then the book I would recommend now for Albanian, you could look at the colloquial. The colloquial now, the new edition is pretty good. It's been completely revamped. The other option would be Discovering Albanian. Discovering Albanian is pretty good, although some of the dialect notes that they have in it are just not what I experience here and in Kosovo. I don't hear people speaking using some of the terminology that they say that they do use. So some of those I'd take with a pinch of salt and learn the standard Albanian from that book, and possibly even ignore a lot of what they say about how people speak in this part of the Balkans, because I've never heard people say some of the words that they say. And I've even asked Albanian speaking friends here, and they've said they've never heard it either. So yeah, anyway, Richard, I agree with you, and everyone has the choice of whether to learn other languages. The problem is when people assume they have to learn any languages for their convenience. Yeah. What would you do if you wanted to get exposed to as many languages as possible with no internet? Move to a multilingual country or place where people speak multiple languages naturally is probably a good way. So the Balkans are pretty good for that. If you want to speak a number of languages, there are definitely areas where you can live and be close to borders and go across borders and things. So yeah, that's one idea. Another one, like a place like Luxembourg, for example. You've got German, French, Luxembourgish, and then you're very close to Belgium and the Netherlands, so you could potentially listen to and speak regularly a number of languages in that part of Europe. But then there'd be other places as well where you could do similar things in many parts of the world. India is probably a very good example of that. Let me see. Hey Richard, do you speak Danish? I can kind of get by in Danish. Yeah. Kabarnya. Kabarnya. Okay. Yeah, apa kabar? Melissa, for Albanian, I've discovered colloquial Albanian, yes. But Russian, so okay. Thank you, Rich, for answering. You're very welcome, Melissa. I'm very happy. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I didn't realize how much English and German had in common until I actively started to learn it. Yeah, there are lots in common. Absolutely lots in common. German really helped me with English grammar and to really solidify a lot of things. And I really like it. Richard, what's the most effective way to practice speaking for one language? 5 times a week, 30-minute sessions, or 3 times a week, 1-hour sessions? Really depends on what you're talking about. 30 minutes, you don't tend to say very much in 30 minutes. So if you're at a level where you're able to say a lot, then maybe an hour is enough time to get into a deeper conversation. 30 minutes might work at a lower level where you just want to practice the basics still. So depends where you are with your learning. Sounds quite specific, so I probably need more information to be able to answer that properly, but yeah, that's kind of generally a general rule for you. Okay, I think I've done all the questions there, so I'm going to go to Instagram and have a look at the questions on Instagram as well. Let me just make sure I've answered everything. Yes. Okay, hello everyone. Yeah, thank you for your hellos. I really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to see you too. Thank you so much. Wow. Okay. Jóstedt from Budapest. Jóstedt. Hogy vagy? Okay. Hello from Azerbaijan. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Nem csak angolul. Nem. Okay. Not much English. Yes. No. Okay. Egy kicsit magyarul beszélek. Okay. Let me see. Hello, Richard. I'm glad to listen to you from Balkans. Nice to have you with me. Thank you for joining. Hello, 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 hello. Nice to see you all. I'll do my best to sort of say hello and like things as much as I can. I was in the bus from the airport previously, sitting next to British people. Oh, wow. Okay. So were you speaking to people in English, I guess? Or you were in an airport on a bus speaking next to British people. I guess they don't tend to speak many other languages generally. As we were arriving to Budapest near the tax shop, you see from the bus, except the is bolt. Yes. So in Hungarian, the word for a shop is bolt. Yes, that's right. Yeah, bolts. Dear me. So yeah, sex shop in Bulgarian. Yeah, so bolt sex. Yeah, that's quite funny. Okay, yeah, I get why you'd laugh. It can, because when you see bolt in English and know what bolt is in English, it can look funny. Yeah, when you have these crossovers with languages where it means something in another language, it can be quite interesting. Okay, I think it's with English translation after 100 meters inside the Hungarian. Yes, okay. So what do I know about Kazakhstan? I know it's a very nice country, and I know that the people that I met there, the people I've met from there, have always been very kind and polite and nice and inquisitive. Actually, I found people in Almaty to be very inquisitive and in a good way. I really enjoyed it. I loved going to Almaty, and I would definitely go back. Yeah, Hungarian is an interesting language, and the conversation in Hungarian is interesting. Richard was in Almaty. Yes, I was with Amir. I was indeed with Amir. Amir is a very nice guy. Happily is not enough. I'm Hungarian. So that's okay. Hungary was still in Europe. Yes. Let me see. Those mistakes are on my class. Okay. Wow. I'm just trying to get through to see any other questions here. I think there's a nice conversation going on Instagram. I like that a lot. Sweet. Let me see. Lots of people joining and saying hello, 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 hello. And let me just see. Okay, my word. It depends on the country you live in. In Poland, you won't be able to get by in English only. Absolutely. In Poland, you can't know. If you want to, particularly if you're staying in Poland for a long time and you want to really connect into the community, you definitely need Polish quite quickly. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Poland is one of those countries where, with quite a low level of Polish, you can start using Polish actively, and people are not going to switch to English necessarily. Even with like kind of when I had like an A1, A2 level in Polish, people spoke to me in Polish all the time, and very few people spoke to me in English. Love making comparison. Okay, comparisons. Yeah. As a teacher and learner, and just in general. Okay, let me see. My favorite topic is cultural shock. Experiencing big cultural differences, I would appreciate a live meeting for the topics so much. Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk more about that. I like that idea. Yeah, reach out to me if you want to talk about it. I'd be very happy to see what we can do on that. Thank you very much. Send me a message. Hello from Brazil. Hello, hello. Olá, tudo bem? Agora temos muita gente. Agora mesmo. Let me just see. Hello, 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 hello. Wow, lots of hellos, lots of hellos. I like it. Okay, I think I've got to all of the questions. Go me. I'm doing well with the questions today. Remember to like and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. You can join me in more places as well and ask me questions. If you want, you can join me on Patreon. I do answer very specific questions and run groups and also answer questions for people on Patreon so that you can get a very specific thing. I'm much of a holistic language learner, so I like to take on board lots of aspects and get to know people. Like, you know, if I don't get to know you, it's very difficult to give you advice. I can give general ideas, but to discuss what really works for individuals, I'm a great believer in actually it's an individual thing that we need to address and not just necessarily every single person all at once, because we're all different. We all react and in different ways to different things, and we all have very different things going on in our lives. So, yep, feel free if you're interested in doing anything like that to actually reach out to me on Patreon. And also, I'm going to plug the coffee thing again because I'm very happy if anybody wants to to treat me to a coffee. I get this question quite a lot. You know, you do this for free, and yes, I do, and I'm very happy to, and I will not stop doing that. At the same time, a lot of people have asked me about how to give me a tip or to send me something to show appreciation, and I really appreciate that. It's very, very kind. And now I've set up this coffee thing so that if you want to give me a tip, you're very, very welcome to do so. It's in the description on my YouTube video, so you can now send me a coffee. There we go, so that I can go and enjoy a coffee outside somewhere and have people come and speak to me in English. Sorry, I couldn't resist. It couldn't resist. But yeah, and I will just speak back in the other language. So we'll be fine. We'll get through it. Let me see which other questions have come in the meantime. Okay. Oh, Jack, good to see you here. Okay, I often get annoyed here in France or anywhere really outside of the Anglosphere when people just assume that I'll be able to get by in English, and they complain when people don't understand. Yes, that does happen sometimes as well, Jack. Absolutely, I know that problem. Even if English is very common, I don't think it's right to just assume everyone will understand you. Like, at least learn, do you speak English in the native language? Yeah, I agree. Learning a few nice phrases to say hello, how are you? Sorry, I don't speak your language very well. Did you speak English at all? I think is a very nice thing to do, just to at least show some basic level of respect for the local population. Hi Rahul from India, nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining. English makes me so lazy because I can communicate to almost everyone already. Yeah, English it opens a lot of doors, and that's why it's probably the most studied language in the world, because a lot of countries have it as their second language that they learn at school, the first foreign language that they learn at school, very often. Says, have you? Let me see. Может посоветовать мне какую-то книгу для того, чтобы научиться читать на русском? На русском? Читать на русском? У меня нет русских книг здесь, потому что я изучал русский, это было давно сейчас, но Но я уже 2 года изучаю русский язык, но иногда я не читал книги. Спасибо, ты... Момент. Я думаю, что у меня может быть, что будет, я думаю, что нет. Мне только сейчас казахского на русском у меня есть тоже, и как еще? А это была моя первая книга по-русски, когда я изучал в Мадриде. И это очень давно сейчас. Это было, когда я был в университете в Мадриде, в Пуске, институт Пуске. Еще Пуске, у меня тоже и книги для эстонского, тоже финский язык, по-русски у меня есть. Тоже финский, это финский тоже. Это тоже финский. Еще, я думаю, что это все. Как это? Это казахский. Ну, по-казахски. А еще это тоже финские. Финская грамматика по-русски, на русском. И это все. Я думаю, что у меня нет литературы по-русски. На русском нет очень много книг. Нет. Это нет. Это все. Я думаю, что это все. Может еще изучать армянского или что будет. Я думаю, что это все. Извините. Окей, как рекомендую рассказы. Чехове, да. Тоже у меня было тоже рассказы по-русски. Но сейчас очень слабо. Окей. Se for assim, vou escrever português ou espanhol para ele entender. Sim, pode ser também. Português e espanhol também, pessoal, muito bem. What's your native language? Oh, right, not mine. Okay. I'm married to a foreigner, and although he speaks my native language really well, I still prefer speaking English with him because I feel he understands me better and I don't have to simplify. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, every relationship is different also as well, so it's people are often surprised when they find out that I don't speak English at home, except for with my daughter I do obviously as well. It would be crazy for me not to pass on English to her, but people are often very surprised when they hear that I don't speak English at home. Até escreveu para usted compreender, Richard. Muito bom. Então, ya. Hola, Richard, una pregunta. Vale, David, dime. Jack, I agree with you. Some people who have been complaining about the most about locals not speaking English or people who have learned English as a second language. Yeah, sadly, that does actually happen as well. So people can sometimes be more... Some people can be more adamant about speaking English and fight more for English than actual monolingual English speakers. I've witnessed that too sometimes. It's an interesting phenomenon. ¿Cuál ha sido el idioma que más te ha costado y el cual has decidido dejar por un tiempo debido a la dificultad? ¿Te ha pasado? Saludos de China. Vaya, muy buena pregunta, me gustó mucho. Es muy fácil. A ver, tengo el libro aquí también. Este idioma georgiano que me costó muchísimo para aprender y yo no llego a hablar el idioma, es que es tan difícil para hablar y para hablar bien, así que tenía que dejarlo a un lado. la verdad es que era demasiado para mí. Entonces, a ver, puedo volver un día, pero ahora mismo no, lo dejo. Ahora mismo. São muito fáceis esses idiomas, espanhol, português, italiano, esperanto e inglês. Sim, pode ser. Exactly. And often they're from other countries where they speak exactly. Some say, yet somehow they all are convinced everyone speaks English. Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Not everyone does. I mean, I've got family members who don't speak English, so it's quite weird, you know, when people say everyone speaks English. So, well, not even in my own family does everyone speak English. Or English does open a lot of doors, but not every door, absolutely. And it doesn't open all doors as widely as other languages can, absolutely, as well. Adiós, bye ahora. Oh, bye, 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 take care. Por favor, habla español. ¿Puedo hablar español? Sí. Pues pregúntame algo en español, te voy a responder en español, no pasa nada. Para mí sí que algún día podría hacer también algo en español, solo en español. ¿Por qué no? Vamos a estar en Cholula este año con la conferencia políglota, así que vamos a hablar mucho en español. Let me see, especially Swedish, Danish, Norwegian. Their English is good. Sometimes I feel that there's no point of learning those languages. Interesting, Joe. Yeah. It can be, I think it's a strange thing actually, because some people, for sure, in those countries think that they're helping by speaking English to foreigners. But actually, it kind of diminishes their own language in a way, because if they're in the country where they speak their own language and then they speak to foreigners in their country in English, and even if the foreigners sometimes are living there for a long, long time, I mean, that would never happen in an English-speaking country. People would speak to them in English slowly and until they get better. And I actually think that if you live in a country, really, you should be learning the language. Just because it's kind of you're living in that country, in that place, and I don't know, maybe that's just me. Is that just me, or is that? But I think that the locals really, if you want people to integrate into your society, then they're going to have to learn your language. I mean, you can't, you know, if you're in Norway or Sweden or Denmark or somewhere, and you're speaking to foreigners all the time in English, you have to also ask yourself the question: is that what they want? Is that what's best for them in the long term? Or are you one of the only people that's actually going to speak to them and help them practice the language? Because they're trying to fit into your society. I mean, I would do the same if someone to move to the UK now. If I were living in the UK and someone were moving over and they wanted to learn English, I wouldn't speak to them even if I spoke their language well, I wouldn't speak to them in their language. I would speak to them in English, because they've come to live in my country, and they want to fit in and they want to be part of society. And the only way to really do that is to speak English. You can't, be very difficult otherwise. Flavio, yes, they spoke in okay, sorry, that's another one. Even my German friend asked me, why are you learning German? German is useless outside Germany. Just use English. That's what German friend said. Wow. Yeah, and actually Germany, it's surprising, but outside of Berlin, I don't know how well everyone speaks English in Germany, to be honest. German's a very dominant language in Germany. I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think still. I think it's still German is pretty important to speak if you're in Germany. Have I tried to learn Japanese? Yes, I have. I took a semester of it at university in Sweden. Didn't get very far with it, but I did study it, and I went to obviously I organised a polyglot conference in Japan, so I used it a little bit there, but my Japanese isn't very good. I wanted to do it more out of not to learn Japanese per se, but to be able to get by in the basics, obviously. But also, I was interested in how they used kanji, because I'd been studying Chinese and I wanted to understand how they used kanji differently, the Chinese symbols in the characters in Japanese. So I did enough to get an idea of what that's about. Let me see. ¿Dónde está la dificultad de Jorgeano? Desde tu experiencia. La pronunciación y la gramática es que es fatal. Para pronunciar todas las letras juntas, que hay una cantidad enorme de consonantes y también cosas explosivas, tipo, para pronunciarlo bien es súper difícil. Y también para la gramática, para dominar bien la gramática, para hablar sobre todas las cosas en general, es súper difícil para mí. A ver, para otra persona a lo mejor no, pero para mí era difícil. Okay. Are Asian languages pronunciation the most difficult and challenging for Western speakers? Depends on the Western speaker. Depends on the Asian language as well. Not all Asian languages are the same, and not all Western languages are the same. So yeah, so for example, I mean, an Asian language like Indonesian, for example, isn't particularly difficult to pronounce for most Westerners. Whereas Vietnamese, I think, would be one of the more challenging ones. So yeah, it depends on the language, it depends on the speaker, but yeah, that would be my general rule of thumb. Exactly, Richard. Some local people who reply in English didn't seem to understand why foreigners would want to learn the local languages despite high level in English. They don't understand. Yeah, Tim, it makes no sense to me at all. Why? This was a big issue in the Netherlands, and the last time I went back actually to the Netherlands, which was a few years ago now again, it had improved. I heard Dutch people being a lot more patient with foreigners trying to speak Dutch, and they were speaking to them in Dutch and not going into English. I heard maybe about 4 or 5 examples of that, and I was pleasantly surprised. Whereas before, often what I'd hear is they go straight to English. Now I understand it's still a problem from foreigners that I've spoken to as well since seeing that, and so my experience isn't necessarily, everything. But yeah, I don't get it either. People complain about that in places like Iceland too. In Iceland, I've never really had that issue. People speaking to me in English, unless I speak to them in English. They do tend to speak to me in Icelandic if I speak to them. But I do also think that that has a lot to do with of my packaging, because I probably present a Scandinavian to them, so they don't. They do speak to me in Icelandic very often. If I speak in Icelandic, unless I get very stuck, then maybe they might speak to me in English. But doesn't every time I've been there, they've tended to speak to me in Icelandic. Puhutko sinä suomea? Okay. Olin Helsingin yliopistossa. Mä arvan, että mä ei puhu suomea niin hyvä. Ja se on I want to speak Estonian now, se on raske. That's not so it's a bit hard now because I've studied Estonian since then, but I could get by in kind of most basic situations in Finland, in Finnish, many years ago, but not now. I think probably it would take me a few weeks to sort of listen to it again and get back in and practice. Unfortunately, not a language that I hear outside, particularly in the Balkans. I don't hear it, but I like it a lot. I can still read quite a few things, but not necessarily answer in a fluent manner. Yeah, chegaste a encontrar islandeses fora de Islândia. Como reagiram ao seu conhecimento da língua? Sim, acho que sim. Quando estava na Universidade de Praga, falava com uma rapariga islandesa e com ela falava um pouco de islandês, mas não há tanto tempo, não muitas vezes. também aqui, uma vez, acho que não, muitas vezes, porque uma língua realmente com poucas pessoas que realmente sabem falar. E por isso agora não chega até aqui muito. Então, isso sim é um problema com uma língua como o islandês. Mas sim, é uma reação bastante positiva. Também é uma coisa surpreendente para eles, naturalmente, porque é uma língua que não tem muitas pessoas, muitos falantes da língua, e também uma língua que realmente dos estrangeiros não sabem muito da língua, não estudam a língua muito. Então, isso sim que é uma surpresa para eles. Found yet to find books in those languages. Let me see. Interact attention to feel at home. Even their intention to feel you feel more at home, they can make people feel less at home by replying in English. Absolutely, Tim. I agree. I think it makes me feel less at home when people speak to me in English in the Balkans. Mostly, I mean, mostly people when I speak the local language, this happens, and then I speak in Serbian, and the way I can describe it best is they look at me as though a cat has just started speaking at them. So they're kind of like, what's going on? This doesn't, like, the face doesn't fit the language, what's happening? But they tend to speak, in Serbia, they tend to speak it. So communities with a high degree of nationalism tend to be more prepared to speak to you in their language. That also seems to be a correlation sometimes as well. So some parts of Serbia, for example, and Albanian as well in some parts of the world, where there's a strong feeling of nationalistic feeling. And I don't mean that in a negative or a positive way. I just mean that in a just a I've noticed it way. They do tend to speak more the language because they're very happy to speak the language. So yeah. Which language has the most number of cases based on your studies? So the ones I've studied, I think Finnish has the most cases. I do have a bit of a problem with the idea of calling everything cases because it's based off Latin and they don't always fit exactly what the whole Latin was about. But and they don't always feel like cases, like for example in Turkish. And in Georgian as well, they didn't all feel like cases necessarily. They just felt more like postpositions, or I don't know. I struggle with the term cases for some of these languages, in the sort of the sense of the word that you know them in Latin or in Russian or something. But yes, the one that has officially got more cases I think it was Finnish. Hungarian has a lot, but I think Finnish has the most. In Europe, I believe Finnish has the most. I think in the world probably, but I'm not sure. I've often heard people saying they reply in English for efficiency, yes, which irks you, Jack, absolutely. Yeah, not everything's about efficiency, right? Often not that people practice English. They do. A lot of people want to practice English, and I get it, but yeah. How come you don't mix the languages you know? Or do you? But I don't realize it so far. Yeah, sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll get mixed a little bit. It's natural, especially if you're switching from language to language, or if you're thinking about a particular language or something. It's possible, but yeah. Jekyll said, absolutely. It's easier. I agree with all of what you're saying. I'm enjoying your conversation, actually, Tim and Jack. It's motivating. Okay. Hungarian or Finnish has more cases. I think Finnish has more cases than Hungarian. Correct me, anyone, if I'm wrong, but some of the cases in these languages cases are rarely used, or they're used in very specific contexts. So it's quite weird. A lot of it's as I say, it's more really to do with preposition or postposition use. I don't know. I would definitely say that there's a case to say that they don't have. Yeah. I'm not sure how many cases they have. My thought was that was 14 in Hungarian, and it was a bit more in Finnish. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they've got quite a few. Estonian has fewer than Finnish. I know that, and I believe fewer than Hungarian. I think that Finnish is the one with the most. But again, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think I've got to the end of the questions. Like Bald and Bankrupt says, when he speaks Russian, he doesn't use cases or grammar, and people still understand him. Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of people know what you're talking about. If you get the cases wrong, it's not the end of the world. It's sometimes it can be confusing, but it's not the end of the world. Richard, how important would you think that Chinese Mandarin will be in the international scene? I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure. I think that there are a lot of people in China. I think it will become more important, but and particularly at the moment where China isn't promoting people learning English as much as before. China's at the moment looking inwards a lot more than it was before, since the pandemic, and so that's going to have an impact on future generations. And there's going to be a lot of Chinese people who will be able to travel or move or go to different places, and they'll have money to spend. And of course, money makes the world go round. Money also means that we need to have infrastructure and a way to deal with people in Chinese. So I imagine it will grow in importance. How much, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if the boat has already gone for another language at this point for the next couple of generations to take over English, simply because the internet is over half of the content is in English. And also, I think like Jack and Timothy are talking about in the comments on YouTube, a lot of people in other countries like Scandinavia, like the Netherlands, like a number of countries around the world, they fight for English. Also, you have India, that is huge, a huge country that has English as a language, and those countries have got a lot to speak. Strangely, English has become a less political language for many of these countries, which baffles me because of historical events. But a place like India, Hindi is highly politicized, particularly north and south, whereas English is seen as a neutral language, which I still to this day do not understand completely, but it is what it is, and we'll see. Hey, look, I would be very happy with Indian English being the main English. I think Indian English is absolutely gorgeous. It's my favorite accent in English, is an Indian accent. So yeah, I mean, one of many Indian, there are lots of different Indian accents, but I like the sounds that come from Indian English. So yeah, I would be very happy to hear Indian English as a main language personally. But yeah, otherwise I don't know. Isso é verdade, sim. No Brasil, sim, é muito mais difícil encontrar pessoas falando inglês. Isso é verdade. Eu também, quando eu fui para o Brasil, eu falava português com a gente e as pessoas não falavam inglês, não havia música em inglês, não havia nada em inglês. E a gente falava em português, português e português. Isso. Então, sim, é verdade. Com um país tão grande como o Brasil. E pode ser também uma situação assim com o mercado local, com pessoas que vão aprender uma outra língua, pode ser chinês, pode ser inglês, pode ser outra língua, e fazendo coisas com outros países também, nas línguas mesmas de fora, e depois com o mercado interior dentro do país, falando as línguas ou a língua local. Isso é possível também, é possível. Richard is the first person to say Indian English accent is a favorite accent. Really? Oh no, oh my word, I love it. It's my utter favorite accent in English. Hands down, Indian English is wonderful. I love it. Do you think AI will replace language learning in the future? And will not need a lingua franca like English? That's also possible, that we just use like such automatic translation devices. Who knows? Who knows? Like a kind of a Star Trek thing. Who knows? That could possibly happen. I think we're way off it yet, though. I don't think we're quite there. There are lots of things variables in there that I think is difficult, but possibly. And when the servers bring you menu in English because of your accent. Oh yeah. Yeah. How many Indian English accents are there? Probably dozens. Absolutely, Timothy. There'll be so many. There is kind of a standard Indian English accent, though. I mean, when I say Indian English accent, I mean people who speak English. There are people in India who speak English as their one and only language, monolingual English speakers of Indian English, who don't speak another language. And so I guess that's the accent that's taken when you, for example, on your iPhone or whatever, when you can change the menu to, you can have British, Australian English, Canadian English, American English, or Indian English, and Irish English, I think. They're the ones that I know about, and New Zealand English often here as well. So those are the ones that I most see, but Indian English is almost always included. But yeah, maybe that's the one that they use as the general one. But there are definitely different flavors of that, because people who speak Tamil or Telugu or Kannada or other languages will have their own way of speaking English as well. But it's often, particularly those languages that I mentioned now, the Dravidian languages, those communities will often prefer to speak English over Hindi in India, particularly Tamil speakers as well. It's often, it's seen as more neutral, from my understanding of the situation in India. From what I've heard, I took part in an event in India, and that was very much one of the topics of conversation. So I'm just relaying what I heard. If anybody has more experience of this, please feel free to correct me or confirm. Okay, unfortunately, I'm going to have to disappear. Thank you all so much for joining me again. It was wonderful to see you all. Remember to like, remember to subscribe, and join me if you want any particular help with your language learning on Patreon. I'm very, very happy to help you. And I look forward to speaking to you all potentially next week. I will be in Poland for the Polyglot Gathering, so I will do my best to get online so that we can talk next week from Poland. So look out for Poland. If any of you are going to be in Poland for the Polyglot Gathering, I will be very, very happy to see you. Remember to come up to me and talk to me. Do not be shy. I am actually quite approachable, and I like to talk to people, and I will be very, very happy to meet you in person and to talk to you. So please do join me, and yes, it will be fantastic to see you all. I look forward to it very much. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, wherever you are in the world, and happy language learning. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Bye-bye.